Welcome, guys, to what is our first episode of Life Design Diaries in 2019. It's taken us pretty much till Feb to actually get this episode out. And the reason is we're actually going to be slightly changing Life Design Diaries going forward. Lucy and I are still kind of working out exactly what it looks like, but that's why there's been a delay in episodes. And stay tuned, because we're really excited to bring you a fresh, slightly different look to Life Design Diaries. In regards to this episode, we have an interview that I did with Matthew Knight just before Christmas. And this is all about what it's actually like to work for yourself. I think there is so much miscommunication, misunderstanding, to be honest, rubbish about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, a founder, just what it's like to actually go it alone and work for yourself. We obviously see non-stop success stories of people that have gone from rags to riches, but there is a completely different side that you never get told, never see. And so part of what we aim to bring you on this podcast is, you know, the truth and the reality behind different lives. And Matthew's is a really interesting one. He actually owns a company called Foxlark at the moment, and what they do is they're an independent strategy and innovation practice. They help teams explore the future and make it happen sooner. So he's got some really interesting concepts and ideas around that. And also what Matthew does is he started a channel, a group really called Leapers. And it's actually quite similar to the idea of life design, because Leapers is all about people making active decisions over their lives and taking the leap away from employment. So that's actually where I speak with Matthew quite regularly now. Like I said, we recorded this before Christmas, but I definitely think this is one for you if you're interested in working for yourself or just finding out a bit more about what it's like. This is definitely hearing both sides of the coin. There's ups and there's downs, and we kind of really discuss all of those points in this episode. So hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Matthew Knight. Matthew, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah, and yourself. And as we've just been talking then, off mic, the reason obviously we've got in touch is from originally the LinkedIn post which you shared, you kindly shared. And it was a really interesting one that we've kind of discussed on a previous episode when we had the psychotherapist Rachel Tillman on. Mm-hmm. So that the topic I want to kind of start with yourself is around vulnerability, because for me, in that post and a lot of your writing, there's a big aspect of vulnerability which really kind of resonates with me, strikes a chord, and just the fact that you're not afraid to put out your own thoughts and opinions, even though sometimes it can kind of portray yourself as quite vulnerable. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that way of writing and why you kind of are happy to share that with the world, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see it as vulnerable. Because writing how I'm feeling and the highs and the lows of things doesn't necessarily make me any more open for attack than if I was writing purely positive and, ballsy statements of what people should do and how they should do it. I think there's too much advice and recommendation and telling people how to do things and what to do and where to go and how they should be running their lives on not just LinkedIn, but, social media and just content generally.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. You're constantly bombarded by 10 ways to improve your health or 17 ways to make you more effective. And I don't have the answers. I don't know how to do everything. And communities like LinkedIn, I find, are a really useful place to ask questions rather than give answers. And over the last 12 months, certainly since I've started becoming an independent, and this is where a lot of my posting on LinkedIn started, when I handed my notice in from a job. I had a 6-month notice period. I was leaving without a job to go to. And I just started asking questions because I'd never resigned from a job before. So I didn't know what that process was like. I didn't have a CV. So I was asking, how do you approach creating these things? And I think, when you ask questions, you are inherently saying, I don't know what the answer is. So that in itself could be seen as vulnerability, but it's genuine curiosity and not knowing what the answer is. So it comes from a place of me wanting to figure stuff out rather than necessarily saying, oh, I need help, or I'm feeling vulnerable or weak, or I don't see, I don't see any of these things as negatives or weaknesses. They're just the state of being.
The situation. Yeah. Has it always been that way though? Because a lot of people would feel that if they're going to share something, it has to be, it's kind of like there's a pressure applied to think that they have to, like you said, provide some kind of answer as opposed to just openly ask a question. Because like you said, when you ask a question, that's telling people that you don't know the answer. So has that always been the way for you, or was that difficult at the start?
There's definitely a tension in that. I'm a strategist. That's my job. So people come to me to have the answer. They have a problem. How are we going to solve that problem? But there isn't a decent strategist in the land who would disagree with, to get to a brilliant answer, you need to ask way more questions. The first brief that you get from someone is never the right one. The first question that is asked is rarely the root of the problem. And there's always an interrogation process, always a series of questions, whether it's the question why, or to explore the context, or just try and understand the problem. That's the best starting point, is to really just ask as many questions as possible. And then you'll start to have a better understanding of the situation. And then maybe you can start to think about what a good answer is, not an answer to a symptom, but an answer to a genuine cause for a problem. So professionally, it's how I approach things. You can't have an answer without a good question. But the second thing, and it is one of a more personal aspect to it, is mental health. And I suffered for a long time, and still do struggle with ups and downs in my mental health, as everybody does. But I recognized that I didn't tell people about how I was feeling, mostly because I didn't recognize how I was feeling. I didn't know that I was going through what, you look back on it now and it was just classic depression. But I didn't talk to anybody about it. And I know that I would have benefited from if I had. And then started to recognize the symptoms of stress and anxiety, and not necessarily depression, but symptoms of people not being as mentally well as they could be in people I was working with. And I wanted to run a team where I knew that people felt that they could come to me with any problem they had, not just, is this work any good, or how do we solve this, but I'm not feeling great today, or I'm not feeling too positive about this. And the only way that I think you can establish that is by leading by example and saying, look, I'm going to be completely open about how I'm feeling and my experiences, so that it is not a weird thing. It's a normal process to say, I'm feeling rubbish today. I don't think I'm going to come in. I'm just going to take the morning off and recharge or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, that really kind of articulates the point I made though about vulnerability, because even though you don't see it as that in itself, what you just said, I struggled with mental health, etc., and this is why that I know that I don't always have the answer and want to kind of create that community. It's basically opening yourself up, isn't it? And do you kind of, like I said before, do you feel that pressure, or is that something which is, I guess, grown over time, and as you've got more and more familiar with doing it, it's become more normal? I mean, it should be accepted. It shouldn't be a problem at all.
Well, there's the thing, isn't it? I mean, vulnerable has negative connotations to it, I think. I agree. It suggests a position of weakness, or that you could be, attacked in some way, or that it is less good than it should be. And I think that's a huge part of the problem, is looking at mental health or anything really, not knowing the answer to a question, regardless of whether it's mental health, if it's professional. If we see that as a submissive or non-optimal state, then we're never going to change the conversation around things like mental health or asking better questions or being open to being wrong. So if we use language like vulnerability, I think we need to get rid of that entirely and just say, you have days where you're feeling brilliant. You have days where you're feeling bad. You sometimes know the answer. Sometimes you don't know the answer. It's all part of just learning and growing and being a grown up. And
absolutely.
I think I would only see it as a vulnerability if it was having a negative impact on what I'm doing. Yeah. And if I was being attacked for it, or if it was holding me back in some way. And I don't believe that being truthful is going to hold me back in any way. I might be completely wrong. I mean, people might be looking at me going, this guy's a crazy loon. He doesn't have the answers. We're never going to hire him as a strategist. So I'm sure they're not. And like you say, I mean, at the end of the day, the reason it struck a chord with me is because it is part of life. It is something which everyone goes through. It's just the difference of whether you want to share that. And it really resonated with me because I also enjoy sharing those things. And it's kind of a theme of this podcast, really, that it's like, it's not all about, the glamorous life. It's actually talking about things that are real life scenarios and how we kind of work our way through those. And there's the irony, right? When people do share that, it's so much more interesting. And when we lean in and say, oh, okay, tell me about that. Either because it's rare to hear those sides of people's lives, or there's maybe a huge connection and people say, I felt that. I feel like that at times. I want to talk about that because I don't have the opportunity to, or I don't feel that I'm able to. So there's clearly a huge desire for everybody who wants to talk about that. But perhaps there is just still too much of a stigma attached to saying that you don't have the answers or that you're not peak performing. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, this is flooded with advice on how to do things, and loads of people that have the answers. So I guess in a way, it's a positive thing that that there's still loads of scope. If you do want to speak the truth, almost, find authenticity. That, like you said, people will lean into that because they do. It's a lot of the feedback we get on the podcast is on subjects where we've been real, discussed it, talked about it, didn't kind of dress it up, and people absolutely get it. And they say, I'm having the same, I'm thinking the same things. I think people want connection, right? And, no matter what you think about celebrity and the cult of influencers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's great to look up to people who you think are nailing it and doing amazing stuff. But it's unrelatable. And I think there's something that feels always more honest and human, and just you can understand what somebody's going through if they're saying, I woke up this morning and my hair was all over the place, and I didn't go for a jog, and I ate a burger from McDonald's for breakfast, and that's me nailing it. Because you're like, been there, done that one. Exactly. I think it's actually quite powerful when I first kind of, I guess, tried to break out of what you'd consider, giving advice, and just put a few things out there that were question based. It almost is weird at the start. It almost felt unnatural just to throw something out there to the world and say, this is what I'm working on, or here's a question I've got. And just see what comes back. But I was quite amazed, to be honest, with the response that you get. And, and then that leads to more conversation, and you never know where that leads to. Yeah. If you think you've got all the answers, then you're doing something fundamentally wrong, right? If you know what the answer is to every single situation, or you can respond within 15 seconds with a nice pithy soundbite, then you're missing a huge trick, because there are so many new things constantly being thrown into the world, and there's no such thing as a Renaissance man anymore. You can't know all things. There's too much information, and so much of that information really deserves to be challenged as well. I mean, it's not even just asking questions. It's saying, is that true, what you're saying? That might be true for you, but is that applicable to absolutely everybody? So I think a lot of that stuff has to be taken with a grain of salt. And there's almost an industry, isn't there, around advice and self-help and promotion, and it makes a lot of people a lot of money. But I think it also causes a huge amount of imposter syndrome and people feeling alienated. And so I suffer from imposter syndrome really badly, to the point of, it definitely does hold me back in a lot of situations. And I'm on a handful of like WhatsApp groups and networks and Slack channels with some really talented people, like amazingly talented folk that I look up to through different parts of the industry. Yeah. And recently, I joined them because I want to learn from others and see what people are up to. And when you're independent, it's really important to have networks and connections in place of people that you can have conversations with. And because, if you're not going into an office every day, you lose an aspect of that. But recently, I'm having to turn some of them off or just mute them, because just day after day after day, there's all these amazing people who've done all this amazing work. And I'm like, I'm just feeling like so inferior compared to what these guys are achieving all the time, what they're doing, and everybody seems to be. And it makes me feel rubbish. I think it's true for a lot of the genre of advice and doing amazing stuff. And it's like, I'm doing this every day and I'm working 100 hours and I've made $1 billion and da-da-da. It's like, I think it makes people feel, it certainly makes me feel just like, what did I achieve today? I made myself a cup of tea and it wasn't even that good.
Of course, though, it's so true, isn't it? And it's like anywhere you look now, I could like turn on my phone and immediately, just by clicking on one app, be seeing someone doing something awesome somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it is actual bombardment with it. It's everywhere. And like you said, if you had a bad day, then but you got to take things with context. However, it's easy to forget that, isn't it? Because you see everything always happening of someone else's best version of themselves, and it's still hard to kind of understand that that's just how they're portraying themselves, and that's not the kind of full picture. How do you so imposter syndrome is something that we've talked about before. It's really I think everyone to a degree suffers with it, but how do you counteract that? How do you kind of support yourself through that when you are feeling like that?
I don't think I do. I haven't found a good hack to work around it yet. I get all of the advice and the ways of stepping around it. So, look at evidence rather than how you feel about stuff, or, get other people to write how good you are at certain things rather than reflect upon it. You say, all of the, I suppose a lot of it comes from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, of being reliant upon evidence of things as opposed to feelings. But I hold these feelings to be so true, so deeply true, that even if somebody presents me with evidence, I won't believe it. I won't let myself believe it. I'll feel that I've tricked them into thinking that, or it was somebody else's input that made it successful. Or if somebody says I'm amazing at this, I'm like, I don't feel I fooled you into doing this, but like you're missing a trick or something. And rationally, I completely understand that is not the case. But it's not about the rational side of it. It's about how you feel about things. So it's, even though it's not real, it is my reality. And I haven't found a good way of stepping around that yet. I think there are some positive things that come from it, though, which is a sense of trying to strive to always do better, because what I do is never good enough. And also, I suppose, a humility around what I do and how I do it, rather than an open arrogance to go, yeah, I'm the best at this and I can blah, 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 blah. So I think, that's a big part of my personality. But it really holds me back in other aspects, being able to like put a decent commercial value on my work and prioritizing myself at the bottom of a list rather than higher up. So it's really challenging. And I'm 40 in about 4 weeks' time. And I do wonder, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Can you ever really change those sorts of things? I just feel like some things as part of my core personality. So I don't know. It's something which I've struggled with for a long time. But if you've got a fix for it, please let me know. Yeah,
well, unfortunately, I haven't.
Oh, useless.
Yeah, I have all the answers. No, it's it's like you said though. It's the hardest part for me is that whenever someone's going through that, you can't tell them. Like if I'm feeling something, and it's kind of like the whole classic. You can't convert someone who's an alcoholic until they kind of not until they recognize it themselves, but until they're ready, obviously, for that advice
to do something. Yes.
Yeah. And it's and you can't know what's going on in everyone's head. So you also can never know how big or small what you feel is in relation to someone else.
It is.
You see what I mean? If you're kind
Absolutely.
of searching for, is that a normal way to feel?
Yeah. It's impossible, right? I'm red green colorblind, so I have no idea how other people see the world. That's just a physical truth.
Yeah.
And you can get into this like philosophical question of, well, who sees what, blah, blah, blah. But it makes you realize that actually you can't ever compare your own experience with anybody else's in any way, because there's no way of comparing like for like. And that, that's, I suppose, the core of things like meditation and mindfulness, where you have to recognize that and say, you need to let some things go because you're never going to be able to change some things, or actually, this is your own personal experience rather than comparing yourself to others all the time. But it still doesn't make it any easier. But as you say, if everyone is always presenting the best version of themselves, that causes two massive problems. First of all, you compare yourselves to these people who are presenting the best versions of themselves. And also, if you are guilty of presenting only your best self, then you are holding yourself up to that. You always have to be this best version. You always have to be the kind of nailing it guy. You always have to, keep that lie going. And if you're never achieving the thing which you're presenting to the rest of the world, you're always going to feel like you're not doing as well as you can. So it's damaging for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. I want to come back to, you were talking about questions and asking good questions. And I think it's really interesting because, again, you talk about imposter syndrome. You obviously speak so confidently, and I'm kind of trying to envisage you in front of a client who's put a brief together. So the classic scenario of you receive a brief from a client, which isn't very good. And obviously what you've alluded to is that quite often, to actually get to the essence of what, is good work, it's to start by asking questions as opposed to come up with the answers. But people are coming to you for the answers. So it's kind of like that scenario where it's I guess it's can be slightly difficult to navigate. But I know you've got a lot of experience in doing that, and it comes across as you're very confident in actually taking that step, and I guess standing behind the fact that you need to ask those questions to produce good work. So first of all, would you agree with what I just said in terms of how you operate to actually get to the kind of root cause of the problem by approaching it question based?
Yeah, I mean, so the confidence thing is really interesting because that's your perception. So, I can
absolutely,
that's how you take how I'm behaving, and that's always subjective, right? So it doesn't kind of really matter. It's you can do very little, I think, to change the perception of how you come across. I think if you just continue to try and be authentic and do a good job, then that's the best approach. But I think where it comes from is I'm genuinely interested in trying to do a good job for someone. I'm not trying to win them over. I'm not trying to get a promotion. I'm not trying to get the next contract signed or anything. It's about, I genuinely want to understand how we can do the best thing for whatever the problem is. So I'm working with a client at the moment who they want to explore the future of their business, where they're going, what it might look like, what they need to do in order to get there. And I'm helping them explore and articulate and define what that future could be. And then I'm going to help them make it happen sooner, by rather than just waiting for, you know, the industry to change or consumers to change. Like, well, let's do something about it now and design that rather than waiting for it. And they're a really interesting business, and they do fantastic work. And I'm really excited about the idea of where that business could be going, and I want to help them get to that place. And I've never worked with them before. I don't know who they are and how they do things, and there's no way that I can work out what their future is without asking a whole bunch of questions and spending time and just hanging out a lot. So, you know, it comes from a genuine curiosity and point of interest and desire to try and do a good job. Because if you don't dig a little bit and figure things out, you know, the real cause of a problem, as opposed to just looking at things on the surface value, you're not going to be able to do a good job. You're not going to solve the problem. You'll just create another symptom. Yeah. And it genuinely comes from a desire to want to try and have a good outcome at the end. And there's something quite freeing about not being in a job in that respect, because the traditional career path of getting a promotion, move up to the next level and get a pay rise and the next job title, and to a certain extent, you have to maybe bite your tongue every so often, or you have to make decisions that will help you move along that path. Whereas I don't really have to do that. I'm not looking for a promotion. I enjoy what I do now. I'm not looking to be the CEO of a big company or anything. So
that's kind of like, a lot of those inner politics are released with the fact that you can just get to, like you said, have the genuine interest to do a good job, as opposed to all of the other things that could stand in the way. Because I think it is having the conviction behind, you know, working with a client. And so for me, when I look at any client work that I've done, I think one of the best things that I can offer immediately in terms of approach is asking good questions and not going down the wrong path. And so just the fact that you've mentioned that, I do know scenarios and people that would never get to that kind of level of understanding because they feel like that they need to provide answers quite quick, certainly in front of a client, certainly if it's paid, you know, they've come to you, you've got to deliver whatever the project is without actually working out if it's the right thing that you're even delivering or the right question that you're answering.
Completely. And I've been involved in no shortage of projects where you go off on that exploration route and you get to the end and they say, yeah, that's great, but we still want to do what we've asked you to do. So I think there needs to be I mean, you've already said it, briefs are rarely well written, but maybe there needs to be a couple of additional things on every page which says, how open are you to challenging this, or how open are you to us going to explore whether it is really the bigger problem, or do you just need it done? And that's sometimes fine because life is ticking away, and you can't always have the luxury of going to explore for a little bit. It's you got to have pragmatism with those sorts of things. I mean, I have worked with no end of strategists who will present 60 slide PowerPoint of really smart thinking, and background research and, exploration and get to a very, very kind of clever position and what we should do. But then it just stopped there. And the client's still like, yeah, great, I'd buy that, but what are we going to do? Or what's it look like? Or what's the first action? And I think there is rarely the luxury of hanging around for a couple of months to work out what you're going to do. I think you need to blend smart thinking and smart doing a little bit quicker. And if it doesn't work, you course correct and fix and do something slightly differently. But
yeah. Have you got, just whilst kind of finishing off this topic, have you got any, are there any specific questions that you ask, like when you're in this scenario, you've got a brief? I imagine, of course, it's bespoke to each person, but is there any kind of key questions that you always try to get answered?
Oh, the classic one is why. I mean, it's such a simple one, right? I mean, Simon Sinek's book Start With Why is often used as an example because it's a brilliant question, and the 5 whys, and
of course, and so he's so many times missed.
So yeah, and I can understand why, because a lot of the time, a client will have 900 other things on their plate, and your brief is just one of them, and they have so much implied knowledge of the situation. So to have to put all those kind of things which seem obvious onto paper can seem daft. Yeah. But a lot of the time, I think the why hasn't necessarily been considered. It's we need to do X, Y, Z because that's what we did last year. We need to carry on doing that, or that's how we've always done it. Or, just the act of talking it through and having a long conversation, even if you get to exactly the same place, is so useful. It's like therapy, right? A lot of the time the answers are inside you, and it's just the act of giving voice to the thoughts and having half an hour just to say stuff out loud, and everybody just comes away a little bit clearer on, oh, okay, I get that. Right, let's crack on. And then you make a decision on whether you want to challenge it, whether it's the right thing to do or not. The other one is money, right? How much money are you willing to spend on this? Because, I mean, I'm sure, you guys have been through this a dozen times, right? Someone will ask you, oh, we want to do this. How much will it cost? Mm-hmm. And they've got a budget in mind. They know how much they're willing to spend. But there's always this kind of, oh, no, you tell us how much it's going to be. And the thing I find frustrating about that is we can save everybody a lot of time and backwards and forwards and just saying, if you've got 50 quid, let's work out what we can do for 50 quid. If you've got 5 million, let's work out a much larger, more in-depth approach, because you can do amazing stuff for 50 quid. And if that's one of the constraints of the brief, just in the same way that we know who we want to talk to, we know when we want to do it, budget is a huge part of that as well. And it gives you a sense immediately of how important something is to them. Because it's not about money, it's about the investment. It's how much do you literally value this as a project? And money totally sucks anyway, right? It's really horrible to talk about, and I get it. But if we just could go, look, we're thinking that we want to spend about $3,000 on exploring this little thing. It's like, brilliant. Well, we could probably do something for $1,200 actually. Let's just crack on and do that, and you save yourself some money.
And do you? So obviously, I mean, I totally agree. This scenario is always, can be frustrating. Of it's weird, isn't it? They just don't want to share. A lot of clients don't want to share. There's this element of, if you don't trust someone, and it's understandable, if you don't trust someone because you may just be meeting for the first time, then there's an element that you feel like they might want to rip you off, or do less work and kind of basically maximize the budget. But from our perspective, you just want to use that budget as best as possible, because as you previously said, it's coming from a place of a genuine interest to deliver great work. So
and sometimes you will get ripped off. Like, it's going to happen, and sometimes you'll rip off your own clients. What goes around comes around completely. But you're not beholden to spending that money. If you say we've got $100,000 and they come back with 99,999, then they're probably working exactly to every penny that they can squeeze out of you. But I don't know. I think there's the problem, right? Somebody has to stop that trend and reverse that to a little bit. And the more people who can be more open and honest about what they're trying to get out of things, and remove this client agency type relationship. It's like you're two human beings who are trying to achieve something. You've both got aims and objectives. Let's get them all out on the table and be honest about it. And then at least we know who we're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. I want to talk to you about Leapers. So you've mentioned this community, this Leapers community that you've set up. First of all, do you want to just explain what it is and why you've decided to set up Leapers?
Absolutely. So Leapers is a community of people who are taking active control over the future of their careers. There's a whole load of really loaded words in that one, so I'm going to unpick it a little bit. But it came from, as I mentioned before, I had a 6-month notice period in a job, which I absolutely loved, really enjoyed, wonderful people, wonderful organization. But I'd come to a point where I wanted to go and do something else. I'd been there for 5 years. My learning curve had started to flatten out. I had a 6-month notice period, and I didn't believe that anybody was going to, wait around for me. So I didn't find a job to go to. I decided I'll hand in my notice and then work out what I want to do and have conversations and coffee and explore for 6 months. So
just to clarify, you were using your 6-month notice to explore so that you could get something set up, or you did that afterwards?
So I handed my notice in the summer of last year. And it was a notice period in the classic one that you're still working. But I was using all of my evenings and weekends, and I only worked 4 days a week, so took Fridays off to have coffees and conversations with people and so on. And I didn't have a strong view on what the next thing that I was going to do would be. I didn't know whether it would be a job, or whether I wanted to work for myself for a bit, or whether it would be a couple of part-time. I just genuinely had no idea. But I needed to give myself a kick up the butt and set myself a deadline to say, I need to do something. I don't know what it is yet. So resigning helped set a deadline for myself.
Okay.
And it was the first time I'd ever resigned. So before that job, I ran my own agency. I'd freelanced for a little while. So I'd never had a job. And as a result, I'd never resigned before. So that was a weird, interesting first experience.
Yeah.
How do you do it? It's weird. What do you put in your letter? What do you tell someone?
How did you do it?
I sat down with my line manager and said, I've decided to go and do something else. I don't know what that is at the moment, but I am leaving because I want to develop further, not because I'm unhappy. Wow. What do I do now? And she was great. It was like, okay, cool, great.
There must have been an element of reflection for them. I want to leave because I want to develop further. Is that a sign of lack of fostering that, or is it just purely you felt that doing something on your own would bring that?
You know what? So I've got this anger towards the idea of employee retention, talent retention. Everything is always towards like, oh, we need to do everything we can to keep people employed here and hired here and not leaving. And I think that's ridiculous. Because it's a when, not an if, right? It's like everybody who you hire, everybody you hire is going to move on. Yeah. The concept of job for life has not been true for many years. And even in there are organizations now who are moving towards trying to reestablish job for life. They are encouraging people to move around within those organizations. So you are always going to leave a position. That is just true. So this idea of we need to reduce the number of people who are leaving, it's like, why do you need to prevent people from going on and doing other things and developing in their career and doing other things. You don't own them. They came to you from somewhere. Yeah. You should be doing everything to enable their journey to develop, not hold on to it selfishly, and investing in whatever their next job's going to be. And if you train them and if you give them all those skills and they learn how to do this amazing stuff, and you believe in them and support them, if they go on to another business, they're going to love you because you invested in them, or they may choose to stay with you because you're such a wonderful organization. But
this idea, I totally agree. The idea of keeping hold of people. I mean, I've seen firsthand, not to me, but close friends, handing in notice, and then, you know, bosses and owners of companies like not talking to them. Like, you know, we've all probably know a story similar to that, when it's like complete cold shoulder until they finally leave the door, you know, get out of the building. And it's like, what kind of example does that set? And actually, what a strange attitude, because so like you said, it is an inevitable scenario, isn't it?
Yeah. And you're not breaking up with someone. It's not your girlfriend. I mean, this is a work relationship. You've been giving someone money to come in and do stuff for you, and now they're saying they want to go do that somewhere else. And you, as their boss, are probably going to have that exact same conversation with your boss in 6 months' time. So it's not like you're hurting anybody by doing it anyway. So it's very strange. And the whole, like suddenly you're persona non grata to an organization, and it's just weird. And I had all of the same symptoms when I handed my notice in. My manager said, "Oh, can you don't tell anybody yet because we need to, work it out or whatever." And I said, "No, I'm going to tell my team today because I have a good relationship with them and I can't keep that from them. And I'll give you till the end of the week to work out whatever you need to do internally." But I wasn't attached to any clients. I wasn't retained to any particular account. So nobody really needed to be notified of anything. And I needed to find a job. I was walking out into unemployment. So I needed to start communicating to people that I'm available and I want to get work. So you can't prevent me from doing that. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, okay, fair enough. That's actually a really good point." And all of the little steps on resigning and those behaviors of when you have handed your notice in, and then subsequent conversations around, "Oh, can you send me your CV?" And I'd never had a CV because I'd done my own thing for however long. And, what's your job title and blah, 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 blah. All of this, I'd never been through that process. And I just found them all like really archaic and hilariously stupid. And I just started sharing the experience that I was having, and asking whether other people were doing similar things. So would you ever leave a job without something else to go to? Or what's this idea of a CV? Isn't it really stupid that you just list dates and times you've been places? And just there was a bit of a groundswell of responses to those posts of, actually, I've been thinking that I want to leave, but I don't feel that I can. Or I don't want to have a CV either. I want to disrupt. And no matter what the experience that I was having, there was always a group of people who were having a similar experience or had done it previously or were in the middle of doing it or were thinking about doing it. And LinkedIn wasn't the good place to have those conversations because it's not threaded. You can't have a proper conversation over a longer period of time. So I said, if people are interested in carrying on having these conversations, come over here. I'll set up a little Slack group. And we'll just keep on chatting. And that was maybe August, September of last year. And that, I called it leapers, people who wanted to take a bit of a leap into the unknown. And we now have about 500 people in there who are all trying to, rather than just wait for the next job to come along or a promotion to be offered to them or waiting for flexible working to be offered, they are all actively saying, "I want to change the way how I work. I want to go and start something up, or I want to go to a different role, or I want to redesign my current role, or I want to have a better relationship with my team. What am I going to do about it? And rather than complaining, actually making an active decision to change how they work. And it's a really interesting community in that, on the one hand, it's a lovely support group. It's like a big virtual hug. So people are very open and non-judgmental, and the V word, vulnerable. But
in a similar situation, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's such a breadth of situations and diversity of situations, but there's a common thread of, I'm about to do something different and I don't know how to do that. Or who do you turn to have those conversations with? And it's just a wonderful place to be, because I will ask a question of something that I'm struggling with, and suddenly like 6 people pop up and go, oh, I've approached like this or that, and equally other people ask questions, and everyone piles in and says, you could do this or that, or just, I feel the same. I don't know what the answer is, but you're not alone. So it's exactly a really wonderful space with some fantastic people from across the globe trying to help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll of course link to it in the show notes for anyone listening to this that wants to join. But I can definitely vouch for that. And I'm really interested in the concept of active decisions. You said about it's a community of people that are actively deciding essentially what they do with their life, or what certain aspect they're looking to build on or to do. Where did that sort of form from? Is it because you kind of saw that your move away from your employed status and deciding to hand in your notice, was that one of your first steps to saying, I'm actively doing something, that a new direction that I want to go down, and that's kind of led to all of these conversations? I'm just intrigued about that whole concept of actively taking a decision in your life, and why people do or don't actually follow that.
I am probably the most guilty of not taking active decisions, especially about my career. I've just had happy accidents for a very long time and fallen into an interesting role, or met some interesting people, or and have been very open to new experiences and go, yeah, sounds great. Let's see what happens. I think at large, there's a changing relationship with work. And for the last however many centuries, certainly the last 100 years, there has been a very one-way relationship. You turn up to work, you do something, they give you money, and then you use that money to do what you want in your life. And in the UK, that has traditionally been, save up and buy a house, start a family, get married.
Yeah.
That dynamic has fundamentally shifted in the last 20 years. I think predominantly driven by a couple of global recessions. Certainly in London, but large portions of the UK, you are never going to be able to afford to buy a house. So this idea of saving up to get a deposit and get a mortgage, and that is not an option for so many people. And then you kind of take a step back and go, well, hold on, if I don't need to save up, I don't need to be on this path of just getting pay rise after pay rise. I don't need to be going to a job and working all hours just to make that money so I can get home, because I'm never going to be able to. So I might as well do work which is fulfilling in different ways. And that in part has driven a great number of people to say, actually, I'm going to do work which is meaningful and rewarding and valuable, not just commercially. And the second aspect is, obviously, with a massive move away from industrialized society and manufacturing, so many more people are working in service-led or knowledge-based business. And it's not just about repeatable, optimizable units of workforce. People need to be engaged with the work they're doing. They want to understand where it fits and what value it delivers to the world, not just to themselves. And there's more of a responsibility now that the employer has to people to help them understand that, to make sure that they're happy and healthy and engaged with their work, and that you're getting something out of them more than just hours at a desk. And all of those things combined together mean that we're more in control of the work that we do and how we do it than we ever have been. And it's manifesting in a lot of the wrong ways at the moment. So things like the gig economy, which is generally optimized towards the business, not the individual, unfortunately. Yeah. But the idea of it, the idea of being able to work on projects when you want, where you want, how you want, is a great one. And I think it will continue to improve, providing we make sure there are some checks and balances in how it's done. And I think people will always be happier if they are more in control of the situation, or perceived to be in control of the situation that they're in, and making active decisions around things rather than waiting for things to happen to you gives you a sense of being in control. So it's a macro trend that we're seeing across everything, not just work. But there is a realization now that things don't have to be the way that they always have been. You can work from home, or different hours, or design your own job title, or co-share a job, or whatever it might be. And that is not just for your employer to make a decision. It's for you to be able to be part of that design process and design something that works for you. So the work works for you as opposed to you having to work for work.
Yeah, 100%. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because like you said, it's a macro trend, and we're right in amongst it now. And all of a sudden, what I find interesting is that we're faced with so many choices, like the old path that you kind of laid out. When I speak to, you speak to parents, grandparents about kind of what it was like in their day. And in a way, things seemed a lot simpler of that kind of old scenario that you said, that you just, job for life, that's kind of where you're at. That's what you work. And then like the path is laid out in front of you. And I find it fascinating that now we're in this kind of huge shift of we're in control and can, have the luxury of making these active decisions, like you say. Well, that in itself brings a whole host of questions and, decisions to make about, well, what do you want to do? And that kind of, I think on one level, it's hugely positive. And I also think it brings a hell of a lot of anxiety and potential stress with it as well.
Completely. You said you've got the luxury of choice. I don't think choice is always a luxury. It takes a huge amount more effort to make a decision when you've got three options than a decision where you don't have any options, right? And I agree. I think the paradox of choice is that you do have to make decisions. And I don't think we are necessarily equipping ourselves with the right support to be able to make those decisions. So there's a frequent conversation that comes up in Leapers is, should I leave a job and go and start this business? Or, it's not whether you should, it's what's the impact and who is that impact upon, and all of the secondary considerations. It's not just like income, but is there going to be an emotional impact? Is it going to change your relationship with your partner or your family? It's a really complicated, heavy decision-making process. And we're not equipped to do that. We're not taught decision-making skills at school. We just have to turn up to maths and do some tests and then go home. We're not taught financial pragmatism at school. I think there's a big gap in helping people make decisions and understand the impact of those things. And then once you get far, far away from the pragmatism side of stuff, the emotional and I don't like saying softer side of things because it's really not soft at times, but so when you step away from a job, and I know we've talked about this before, when you step away from a job, you're giving up a huge amount of support and infrastructure and scaffold that helps you make some of those decisions or supports those decisions. You know, you've got hopefully a career path in place. You've got HR to give you advice and guidance. You've got a legal team when somebody tries to sue you. You've got people around you that you can have conversations with. And when you step away from those traditional roles, you lose so much of that support that I think a lot of people don't appreciate how important it is, how valuable it is. And I'm doing a lot of research into social isolation at the moment, and something like 70% of freelancers say they feel hugely isolated and disconnected when they're working on their own. And social isolation is a massive problem for the UK, just wholesale, regardless of your situation. The government are doing a brilliant job working with partners like Mind, and there was a report a couple of weeks ago about how they can tackle social isolation, and businesses are a huge stakeholder in that. What can employers do to support their employees? But over 15% of the UK workforce are self-employed. So who's going to do that for them? Who's going to provide that support? And with a massive increase in, you know, solopreneurs and independent workers and freelancers and consultants and blah, 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 blah. And this is not a marketing thing either. It's not a white collar challenge. You know, every tradesperson, like a builder or a plumber or an electrician, is probably that you've come in contact with is probably self-employed. You know, the entertainment industry has been using this model since the 1920s. It's not just a marketing and people who want to work with their MacBook in a coffee shop. And there's a huge gap, I think, and it's going to cause a huge problem in terms of mental health for those individuals who have just chosen to step away without considering the ramifications of it.
Yeah, and especially because as we said, one of the biggest comfort blankets that you lose is that financial stability. If you know you've got and I think we've done a podcast recently on just the importance of getting your first client when you go self-employed. You know, having a first sale, and I think you talk about mental health. I think things like that really make an impact, because if you take that step and you drop, you know, all of those support groups, like you said, but from being employed, and then it doesn't seem to start going well immediately, which is quite typical. It you know, in terms of mental health, it can lead you down a whole different rabbit hole to if you've managed to get something set up, and then you're kind of running. Then, you know, you at least have got a client, you're at least away. You know, you just feel like you're progressing and going in the right direction, as opposed to what have I done and quitting my job.
Yeah, I mean, you must have been through this process, right? When you took your journey, I mean, was there a background anxiety constantly whilst you were traveling that was, you know, we're going to have to come back and make some money at some point? And did that have a negative impact on the
ours was definitely interesting, because we left, you know, we left our jobs. We had a few clients who had money that was coming in from from a few online things that we did whilst we were traveling. But yeah, absolutely. I guess the fact that we were away all over Asia just kind of amplified some of those thoughts, I guess, because you're thinking, you know, you really want to, I guess, make a dent in what you're doing, and, you know, keep improving. But it's as we've documented on this podcast, it's very difficult whilst you're also balancing that with traveling the world. So it's I think those things probably amplified, but certainly the support group, the comfort blanket, drops completely, and you find yourself, you know, at your own wits, really. You know, you decide exactly what you do now, and
that's hard, right? Because
because what do you focus on?
What do you focus on, and how do you prioritize investing in yourself to a certain extent? You know, when you've got a job, somebody's probably tapping you on the shoulder to say, oh, you need to go do this training course, or how many hours have you put on your CPD log or whatever. And there's almost like a nudging, because they've, you know, sometimes reluctantly need to invest in people and develop them. But as you say, you know, if you're freelancing, your focus and attention is finding that first job, doing that work to the best of your ability, chasing the invoice when they don't pay it, finding the next one, bang, 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 and to take an afternoon off to go and read, or an hour to meditate, or even, taking a holiday is so incredibly hard, because you're like, oh yeah, but so
it's like a feeling of guilt. It's like a feeling of guilt, isn't it? If you are not at it all the time.
Exactly. And that's where the myth immediately gets dispelled around, I'm going to go be freelance or start my own business because I want to be in control of my own time. I think you're way less in control of your own time to a certain extent when you're working for yourself, because if a client calls, you kind of react to it. Whereas if you've got a job, if you've gone home, maybe you're not checking that email, or on a weekend you don't go into the office. I think there's a bit of a myth around entrepreneurship that it's in some way, better work-life balance or whatever. But there are still really positive things that come out of it, and you can design it. And again, that's the active element. You can't just be reactive to the context of being an independent. And if somebody calls, you have to answer it. You don't have to answer it. And if you can really consider and design the way that you want to work and the way that your life flows between work and outside of work, and say, no, actually, Monday afternoons is going to be my ironing day or whatever, and stick to those things and say, this is as important as chasing that info, or doing that work, or seeing it even as work.
Yeah. It's designing all aspects, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just the work part and completely neglecting the social part, the relationship part, the family part. It's actually planning in time for all of that. And I think, when you're self-employed, you actually need to focus on that more so than ever, because it's quite prescribed, isn't it? If you've got as you call, I like the term, a job, often it's working hours, and after that, that's your social time. So it's kind of like planned for you. Yeah. Whereas, self-employed, there's kind of no rules. You sort of, you have to design it yourself.
The idea of work-life balance is weird to me, because it suggests that work is one thing and life is another, and they have to balance out, which is not true. Work is part of life, and it's about designing a integrated existence that has work in it, it has play in it, it has friends and family and social and whatever else you do, and it's how they thread together in a positive and healthy way, as opposed to these really boxed distinctions between, oh no, that's work, or this is my professional self and this is my personal self. One of the products which Leapers has created earlier in the year is called Manual of Me, and it's about helping people understand who you are. So it rather than it being a CV, which is, here are the things which I can do and here are the places where I worked, it's how I work, the sort of work I enjoy doing, what motivates me, how to give me feedback, working habits and preferences. So you get a better measure of the person. And it's rooted in this idea of, you are a single person. You don't have a professional you and a personal you. It's you. You might change some of your behaviors, and you might swear less at work, or you might dress up a little bit more, but it's still you. And the more that we can just be honest and bring ourselves to each of these situations, whether it's personal or work or whatever it might be, the easier it is for everyone. Just because you're not having to go, oh God, how does professional me behave in this situation? Or, what's the right thing to do? And it comes back to what we were talking about, the positives and the negatives earlier, is that you should be able to bring the negatives to work as well as the positives. We're always encouraging people to be really passionate and excited and love and all these kind of positive emotions, driven, exactly. But you're not allowed to be disappointed or upset or frustrated or angry. You're not allowed to bring any of that to work. And that's just discounting people are people rather than just one little slice of who they are. And if there's one thing that comes out of this shift in how work happens, I hope that it is more of a respect that you work with people, not human resources.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big realization for me quite a few years ago now that there doesn't have to be those two people. And when I started basically showing my personality, because I kind of thought initially, first job type thing, thought that you have to present this kind of very professional version. And it was only when I dropped that, it was massive for me personally, because it's all of a sudden your personality is coming across in the workplace, which actually is always surely your asset. It's how you are. It is you. And like you said, there's only one version of you. So I totally agree with that.
And hopefully that's the thing which protects us against the threat of AI, right? It's like that. That's that's why you'd hire a person over a script to do something, is because of the nuances and complexities and the breadth of their personality and what they bring to it. Not just I can do this job for 8 hours a day, but all the stuff that you do outside of work that you bring to the picture. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Matthew, it's been awesome chatting to you. Really, really interesting conversation. Do you want to just again remind everyone of where they can find you, and particularly, I imagine Leapers would be of interest to quite a lot of people listening?
Absolutely. So Leapers can be found at leapers.co. It's predominantly a Slack group, but if you go to leapers.co, then there's a little invite link where you can just join up and you'll be welcomed with open arms by everybody else in the group. And you can find me as a person at thinkplaymake.co.
Perfect. Okay. Matthew, once again, thanks a lot. I really, really enjoyed that.
Me too. Let's do this frequently. I enjoy this.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.